One of the things that I hate the most about this space, about the news cycle, about politics, is the fact that you get told what is or isn't true, especially by government and government bodies and mainstream media. I hate it because chances are, as we've really discovered since the beginning of the blip in 2019, 2020, what they're saying is true usually ends up being the opposite. And that's what we're taking a look at today. There's, I don't know what to call it, a psyop, not to sound conspiratorial, a slander campaign. None of this is making any sense. You go anywhere in a major city, out in the sticks, nobody is supporting Justin Trudeau. Nobody is supporting Mark Carney. Hell, people don't even know who the hell Carney is. And somehow I'm supposed to believe now that Carney's pulling off this miraculous win against Pierre Poilievre. It doesn't make any sense. It stinks. And that's what we're taking a look at today. We're going to take a look at these polls because they just updated last night and it reeks. Okay. You can go back to any one of my videos. And I used to start off all my videos. I haven't for the past maybe a couple of weeks, but I used to start off all of my videos with the polls. And Pierre was sitting at 230 odd projected seats with a bottom line of like 190. Well, apparently this poll here and other polls alike are saying that the Liberals are actually catching up and the Conservatives are almost out of a majority territory, right? With 192 projected seats, and the Liberals are now apparently at 101. Jagmeet's gone down from 30 or 20 seats down to 11. And then you have 99% likely for the Conservatives of winning the most seats right now. But then you also have 74% likely for the Conservatives of having a majority government. So all of that is coming down. I've never seen 74 in like 2.5 years. I haven't seen it at 74%. And I just don't believe these numbers. I don't believe it. All while these polls are changing. Okay. You also have a bunch of posts like this that are coming out on social media. Mark Carney leads Pierre Poilievre by 14 points as the best candidate to negotiate with Trump. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's got like 23,000 views. That doesn't make any sense. And you got the Toronto Star saying the country wanted change. Pierre Poilievre seemed like the answer. Then along came Donald Trump. Look, they tried doing this in America with Kamala Harris. They said, Kamala's pulling ahead. She's pulling ahead of Donald Trump. Oh my God, she's going to be the first female president. And then we saw when people actually went out to vote, it was a slaughter. And that's why you have a majority government for the Republicans, for Donald Trump. And that's what you're going to see here in Canada, a sweeping majority, because look at what's going on social media. It's all conservative. There's no liberal rhetoric. Aside from the cesspool on Reddit, it just doesn't exist. Go out into the streets. There's not liberals waving Canadian flags to say, yay, we're patriotic. It's conservatives that are out waving Canadian flags, protesting usually half the time the liberal government. I mean, there's no liberal majority. There's no liberal government that's going to win. I'm telling you right now that that's not going to happen. You can choose to believe me. You can form your own opinion, or you can choose to believe what you're seeing online with these mainstream media propaganda attacks. But I want to caution you that when you see those types of shocking updates, okay, it's like a form of clickbait. Take it from me. All right. Look, I'm telling you, there's no liberal government that's going to win. Nobody knows Mark Carney. He's not going to win. But he has been doing a massive campaign. And when you stack up Mark Carney versus Pierre Poilievre in their individual speeches or in their interviews with the media, it's totally different. Polar opposites. The media is trying to find a crack in Pierre Poilievre's armor. It's not working. The media is also badgering Mark Carney, saying, how are you going to distance yourself from Justin Trudeau? How are you going to do anything differently? And his answers are always insufficient. So let's take a look at a couple of these recent interviews.
Liberal leadership contender Mark Carney says he has what it takes to go toe-to-toe with U.S. President Donald Trump.
Why am I here now? Because we're in a crisis. This, for better or worse, my career, my experience prepares me for this moment.
Speaking to CBC News for the first time in this leadership race, Carney pitched himself as a steady hand who can help save the country from economic ruin.
We can't control President Trump, but we can control what we do here at home to reinforce our economies.
The former central banker is promising to build new east-west pipelines, dismantle provincial trade barriers, and lower taxes if elected. Policies echoing those of Pierre.
The unjustified threats of tariffs and 51st statehood of Donald Trump have united our people to defend the country we love.
Poilievre is now calling out Trump and shifting his campaign rhetoric from strictly denouncing the Liberals
Everything feels broken in Canada.
to promoting the country at a Flag Day rally as it stares down an American adversary.
We will bear any burden and pay any price to protect the sovereignty and independence of our country.
And honestly, that was one of the most impactful political speeches I have ever seen. And I will make a separate video going into the nitty-gritty details about that, because there are so many things about what he said. It's not just intra-provincial trading that's important, but it's also breaking down those barriers for our labor jobs, right? For nurses, for doctors, for the medical industry. There's so many things to go over that Pierre Poilievre is acknowledging that the government hasn't in the past 9 years. For example, just a bit of a teaser for an upcoming video, the medical emergency, the blip. The Liberal government had an opportunity to revolutionize our medical industry here in Canada during that period. And instead, they used their powers for evil. What they could have done is break down all intraprovincial barriers and said, you know what, you're qualified as a nurse in British Columbia, but now all of a sudden you want to relocate to the East Coast or to Ontario. It's a medical or it's a pandemic, whatever the heck they wanted to call it, public health emergency. Normally, in order to transfer your skills, you either have to get re-educated, which it takes several years to do in that field, or you have to pay like a fee, like $1,000 per year to be a part of a board to allow you the credentials through money to work in those other provinces. That's insane. And we're going to talk about that in another video, but Pierre wants to break all that down. So it's not just a trade of oil and gas and goods and you know, like selling our Okanagan wine to Ontario. It's also for our services. So keep that in mind and make sure you stay subscribed with post notifications so you can be updated when that drops.
Outside the political arena, mounting U.S.-Canada tensions on display during a high-stakes hockey game.
We're going to drop the gloves right away.
As Trump's threats hit a nerve.
I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
What some initially thought was a joke, now taken seriously.
I don't believe the administration is our friends.
After meeting with one of Trump's senior advisors this week, Canada's premiers were told, take what Trump says at face value. That left some of them shaken.
I came away from the week knowing this administration wants to turn the U.S. government's approach on everything upside down.
They delivered the message that he is not joking when he says the 51st state.
Polls show a tightening federal race in the wake of Trump's threats. The Liberals are inching up after being on the back foot.
Look, if the Liberals are in power, miraculously, I don't know if they cheat or something, if they win this upcoming election, I think there's more of a likelihood for us to be in a further deficit. I mean, that's Mark Carney's promise. He just said that in an interview in one of my previous videos that I did, like a strictly Mark Carney interview. The entire video, he sat down with a CBC reporter and he's like, yeah, no, we're going to look at the budget and we're going to be in deficit just for a little bit though, just for a little bit longer. For crying out loud, that's what Justin Trudeau said over 9 years ago. All right. No. The only way that Canada's going to be the 51st state is if it's under Liberal incompetence management. No, under Conservatives, under Pierre, that's not happening. He's putting money into our military. He's going to be making money by breaking down those interprovincial barriers for trades of goods and services. We're going to expand who we're selling our stuff to, right? It's not just going to be America. It's going to be the whole world. No. We're going to be a phenomenal economic powerhouse. It's going to take some time, but I for sure believe that we're going to get there.
But for months, Poilievre hopes talk of putting Canada first will keep him and his party first among voters.
And we have some indications today on where the Liberal leadership race stands.
Yeah, the Carney campaign tells us he's hauled in nearly $2 million since this race kicked off last month. It's an impressive figure that's similar to what Poilievre fundraised at this stage of his leadership campaign. Carney's two main opponents, Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gould, haven't said how much money they have on hand, but sources tell CBC News they do have enough money to pay the final entrance fee and stay in the race. Ian?
JP Tasker in Ottawa. Let's go to CBC News chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton. And Rosie, during your talk with Carney, you got more insight into his plans and his motivation.
Yeah, Ian, Carney did flesh out a bit more some of his policies, but really the most surprising revelation was when I asked Carney why he was entering politics right now, given that he's flirted with this idea for many years. He then disclosed that in 2012, when he was governor of the Bank of Canada, he was approached by then Prime Minister Stephen Harper to become finance minister. Carney said it wasn't appropriate to go from the central bank into politics directly. Harper's former director of communications responded to this by saying Carney's not telling the whole story and that Harper in no way supports Carney. The decision to disclose this piece of information right now, though, Ian's pretty interesting because the Conservatives have been obviously focusing their attacks on trying to discredit Carney, including the work he did with the Harper government during the economic crisis in 2008. So this throws a bit of a wrench, certainly, into some of that criticism.
Yeah, that is really interesting. This weekend, we saw Poilievre pivoting on his message.
Yeah, the Conservatives are trying to talk more about what's worrying Canadians right now, the tariffs, Donald Trump. So you heard from Pierre Poilievre on Saturday things like, we will bear any burden and pay any price to protect Canadian sovereignty. But we also heard Poilievre doubling down on the need to axe the consumer carbon tax, even though no Liberal leadership candidate supports it going forward. So the opposition leader trying to...
No, that's not true. They are saying that they're gonna tear down the carbon tax at the consumer level, but it's still gonna be for the highest tiered people that are paying that bracket. Okay, so no, that's fake news. Okay, she even interviewed Mark Carney, and he said, "Well, we're not tearing it down for everybody." So it's still going to be put onto the consumer. It'll just be in a different way. I cannot believe that she's basically spreading misinformation from her own interview. I watched it right here on the channel. It was the last video that I posted. That's absolutely absurd. And speaking of absurd, you have different views that's come of these tariffs. You have people that are taking a hard stance against America, boycotting Americans' goods and their services. And Canadians are apparently canceling their trips to America. So let's take a look at this video here.
We're not going to America. We're not spending our money there. It's Canada first, baby.
On social media, Canadians are loud and proud about boycotting trips to the U.S.
Flights, accommodation.
Michelle Porter is among them. She had a Florida trip for herself and 6 family members all booked. But Donald Trump's tariff threats changed everything.
I just canceled it.
Canceled a 2-week vacation, including flights, accommodations, and Disney World tickets. Thanks to insurance, she got most of her money back, but she lost about $1,300 US and says she has no regrets.
As Canadians, that we need to stick together and as unity, and I raise my children to feel the same, be proud Canadian.
For Canadians, the U.S. has long been a popular destination. According to the U.S. Travel Association, visitors from Canada topped the list last year with more than 20 million visits. It warns that just a 10% dip in these trips could mean a loss of $2.1 billion. WestJet has already seen a 25% drop for U.S. travel since Donald Trump's tariff threat. Come March, Air Canada will reduce its capacity for some flights south of the border.
I think that it's a little disingenuous as well to not include the fact that a lot of Canadians can't afford going to America now, and given the fact that our dollar is so freaking bad, like, oh my goodness, I really hope that we could pull ourselves out of this, because yeah, it's not sustainable where it's currently sitting at. I mean, I think it's back up from 67 or 66 cents back up to 70 cents or something like that. But we should be a lot closer. We should be on par or very close to it with the American dollar. But now we got to take a look here at Justin Trudeau, who's going to a NATO summit, his last NATO summit. Kind of crazy that he's even able to attend this since he's announced his intention of resigning, and the Liberal leadership race is going to be concluded in the next 30 days. But here we go. He's his last trip for representing Canada, and it's not good because we've been failing time and time again of meeting the minimum contribution of 2% of our GDP. And at this point, I think NATO wants to kick us out, but they haven't yet. And now that Papa Trump is back in office, it seems like he wants to raise it from 2% to 5%. So I don't really know where Canada's going to be under Pierre Poilievre as a conservative government. I think he wants to put in significantly more money and easily hit that 2%. But as it stands right now, it's not looking good for Trudeau or for Canada for that matter. So let's take a look here at this video.
For decades, the Munich Security Conference has been an annual forum for the transatlantic alliance to hold discussions and articulate a unified worldview. But this year's gathering will be remembered instead for the US criticizing not its adversaries, but its European allies, and sowing confusion on its plans for peace in Ukraine. Last night, hours after Marco Rubio assured Melanie Joly and the other G7 foreign ministers that Europe would be involved in talks, the US special envoy for the conflict backtracked.
Can you assure this audience that Ukrainians will be at the table and Europeans will be at the table?
The answer to that last question, just as you framed it, the answer is no.
That table initially will be in Saudi Arabia. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in Israel today ahead of those talks between only the U.S. and Russian officials. But this plan has been roundly rejected by European leaders.
Europe needs to be a part of this process. Ukraine needs to be a part of this process. If not, this type of ceasefire is not going to be credible.
So French President Emmanuel Macron has hastily arranged an emergency summit in Paris on Monday, inviting European, EU and NATO leaders. The message, if Europe is going to have to keep this peace without American support, they will have a say.
We are witnessing tectonic shifts of the order structures and also of the positioning of major powers. The United States really is the big question mark at the moment.
A Kremlin spokesperson has said Russia is keen to speak to the US about peace and not war. Unusually, deciphering Washington's positioning is what's causing more of a headache. Indeed, the US has sent a questionnaire to European governments tonight, asking them what they could contribute towards Ukraine's security and whether they'd be willing to send troops to the country. Meanwhile, President Macron has spoken directly to Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, telling him explicitly Europeans must be at the center of the peace process.
That's kind of crazy that Russia might even potentially want to join NATO. They've tried to join NATO for the past like 20 or 30 years or something crazy. They don't want to be painted as the bad guys in movies or in real life. And I don't know if that's even something that could be considered, but it seems like Trump has a pretty decent relationship with Putin. And is that going to be enough to bring in Russia into NATO? I don't think so, but are we going to see some historic shifts in terms of creating peace and even possibly trade deals and lifting any embargoes that we have on Russia? Yeah, I absolutely think that. I think you're going to see even Trump go to Moscow, meet with Putin there, and you're going to see for the first time since 2015, Putin go back to America, but specifically be in the White House. That's my personal opinion, folks. I would love to know yours. And you know what? If the tensions do come down internationally because of Trump, maybe we get a little bit of slack for not hitting our 2% GDP minimum contribution, or maybe not. But you know, hopefully that we can just. Hopefully I don't say nothing today and tomorrow at this emergency NATO summit. And now we got to take a look here at Chrystia Freeland, because she just recently went on the media and she is trailing behind Mark Carney in the leadership race. I thought Chrystia Freeland might have been a serious contender. In fact, I was thinking that she might even win it. But after seeing Mark Carney and the elitists that are backing him, and the fact that he's already raised $2 million and he's gone on all these talk shows and done all these interviews on different stations, I mean, I think it's scheduled. It's already elected or selected that Mark Carney is going to be winning. But let's still take a look here at Mr. Speaker.
Liberal leadership candidate Chrystia Freeland was on MSNBC's Velshi today, making the case that Canada's trade relationship with the U.S. benefits both countries. She told host Ali Velshi that starting a trade war with Canada will hurt the U.S.
It relationship with Canada is unique, and that's why when tariffs are proposed on Canada, you get such a negative stock market reaction, because the reality is the trade is balanced and mutually beneficial. I mean, Ali, in your intro, you talked about the trade deal that governs our relationship, and here's the paradox. Right now, we have a trade deal, USMCA, we call it CUSMA, which was negotiated by Donald Trump. It was negotiated by Donald Trump. It got support from Nancy Pelosi when she was Speaker. President Trump has called this the best trade deal in the world. So it's pretty absurd to be trying to violate that.
Freeland played a crucial role in negotiating the current trade deal between Canada and the U.S. and Mexico. She was the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of International Trade for most.
Yeah, and she was also the finance minister and absolutely botched that. So I don't think we give Freeland any credit for anything. And to wrap this up here, we're going to be taking a look at CTV's political analysts and what they think of Pierre Poilievre's recent Canada First rally. I've shared my opinions on it in a recent video. I will do a more in-depth dive into that, into some of those specific policies that Pierre did mention. But I do want to take a look here and see what these guys have to say.
What do you think we can expect to see moving forward with the Conservatives following yesterday's messaging shift?
Well, they're showing that they do have a depth of polling and focus group information to shape change, because, of course, the two pillars of their election campaign were going to be, don't we hate Justin Trudeau, and let's get rid of the carbon tax. None of the Liberal candidates are talking about the carbon tax anymore. As you just mentioned, they've come up with other ways of saying that they want to put a price on carbon, but it's not the carbon tax that is facing consumers. And of course, Mr. Trudeau's already announced he's stepping down. So that's really changed things for them. But you have to admire, on a pure political level, the ability of the Conservatives to change rapidly. It's hit and miss so far. I think that Poilievre did very well yesterday. Shifting over to patriotism as a key theme, that's a winner. Look at the size of that flag. And I think that, he wears it well. It seems to be heartfelt, and it's the type of thing that Stephen Harper was talking about in a recent book. And
it was phenomenally genuine, even at the end. If you go back and watch the final moments where he's finished his speech and he steps back, you can even see Pierre get a little bit choked up. Call that whatever you want, call that weakness. I choose to call that strength. It shows that he was vulnerable in that moment and he was speaking from the heart. Whether or not he had a teleprompter, he's extremely patriotic, and he's showing that not only with his wits about our history, about where we're going, our values, right? He talks so much about the history of Canada, John A. Macdonald this and that, and putting Terry Fox back on the passport. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. It's more patriotic than Justin Trudeau's ever been. Trudeau's LARPing, right? Pretending to be somebody that he is not. Just the way freaking Trudeau's cadence is in his voice is super, super bizarre. So the recent shift that Poilievre has taken from, going after Trudeau, obviously can't do that anymore because he's freaking committed to resigning. Oh, no, les papiers, as he said when he walked to the podium. But Pierre's shifted phenomenally from that to being exactly what this rally was. Canada first, patriotic, bringing hope back to Canadians for wanting to wave the Canadian flag. And it's not attached to a protest the way it was with the Freedom Convoy, right? It's not attached to any of that. It's just bringing patriotism back to Canada, which is phenomenal. Very, very good.
In a very strong op-ed that Stephen Harper circulated, so people can associate with that. I think that he's going to be able to ride that one a fair bit, but it really depends on what Canadians mean when they say they want change. Does Mr. Poilievre represent real change with regard to the situation that we're living right now in Canada? We've got an American president saying and doing things that no one would have believed possible just a few weeks ago. Is Mr. Poilievre seen as the person who can take that on, or is he seen as somebody who, a little bit like Mr. Trump, likes calling people names, likes deprecating them, likes going after them and knocking things down? He doesn't seem to be, anyway, to those who know them, and I did. I spent 10 years across the aisle from him in the House of Commons. He's not the type of guy to build things up. So right now, Carney is seen as the person who can do that, who can both take on the Americans and come up with something positive for Canada. I think that Poilievre is trying to do that. I'm not sure it's going to work, though.
And of course, all eyes are on Donald Trump right now amid the tariff threat. What approach should Ottawa be taking right now with the Americans?
You know, I'm going to say that I admire the way we've been doing things so far. A lot of people said, oh, why did Trudeau go to Mar-a-Lago? Trudeau went to Mar-a-Lago because Donald Trump had just been reelected president and he got a chance to have some FaceTime. Yes, the 51st state thing came up, and I understand Premier Fury's having been told in the White House by not very senior people to take the 51st state threat seriously. It's not that it's not to be taken seriously, because it is being said by the President of the United States, but is it in any way realistic? I think the answer to that is no. It's all part of the game of being Donald Trump. So we saw the 13 premiers, the 10 provinces and the 3 territories head to Washington together. That in and of itself, Renee, that's fantastic. We found out that
yeah, and then the next day or later that day, Trump came out and he said that he's adding tariffs, 100% tariffs or something to all vehicle imports into America. So no, the 13 premiers that did their little magic school bus field trip to the White House, that was, I mean, like almost embarrassing. The way that they represented themselves in the media afterwards, and Doug Ford said, oh, I'm not at liberty to discuss with who from the White House we met. Then they pan to David Eby, and David Eby just says right then and there who they spoke to. Like, the communication was just so weird, so embarrassing. The only premier that's been trying to bridge the gap between Canada and America and President Trump has been Premier Danielle Smith, but we all know that. I think that you're going to continue to see more attack campaigns, more attacks on Pierre Poilievre. And it's going to ramp up. The fact that Carney's already raised $2 million, that's his own money. That's not even for when the amount of money that he has when he becomes the Liberal leader or even the interim prime minister. He'll have way more access to funds there. And so I think you're going to start to see that rhetoric prop up. You're going to see a lot of polls changing, and they're going to show that it's, oh my God, now all of a sudden the Liberals have overtaken Pierre and Carney's going to win with the majority. Yeah, right, man. At the end of the day, people have to show up and they have to vote. And if there's anyone who's been more anxious and more prepared to vote in this country, it's people who are fed up with Justin Trudeau, the Liberals, the spending and the deficit, right? The drugs running rampant in the streets, the lack of proper management, of proper common sense in this country. And not even though Trudeau's gone, oh no, les papiers, right? That still falls on Freeland. That still falls on Jagmeet. That still falls on Carney. All these people are part of the problem. And so, of course, just because there's no more F Trudeau rhetoric, because there's no more F Trudeau momentum, just because there's not that many F Trudeau flags flying around or stickers, that doesn't mean that now all of a sudden all hope is lost. No, all hope is even still more there because we're facing, ongoing turmoils with America and stuff like that. And people are having to very much pick a side on who they want to be, American or Canadian, or even in Canada, Liberals or Conservatives, because that's what it's going to come down to in the end of it. And so just because Trudeau's gone does not mean that Carney's now all of a sudden going to be poaching Pierre Poilievre's voters. Hope that clarifies things. Don't fall for those false flags. And I look forward to seeing you guys in another video. Hope you subscribe. Hope you like this. Bye for now.